Yo, welcome everyone to another episode of Weird Growth, the podcast where we hear the strange and often unpredictable journey that founders take. But the conversation doesn't stop here. If you want to stay one step ahead and unlock exclusive access to exclusive insights, thought-provoking summaries of our latest episodes, and a curated collection of valuable resources from across the web, don't miss out on Ammo Marketing's monthly newsletter. Please subscribe to our newsletter by the link in the description. This episode is a little bit different. We've got a wonderful guest called Mike Drysdale, who is a special kind of CMO, Chief Mystery Officer. Whatever that is, we'll find out. He's also a creative director, strategist, and storyteller extraordinaire. Welcome, Mike. Thank you for joining us here on Weird Growth.
G'day, mate. It is good to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
It's been a long time coming. Glad you could finally carve out some time in your busy schedule to join us, mate. It's going to be a fun chat. The reason I say it's a little bit different is normally we have tech startup founders on Weird Growth, but having someone like you who is very close to the tech community and works closely with a lot of founders and has a special skill set, which I think is really important for founders to understand at a deep level. That's what I'm really excited to dive in on today. But please introduce yourself. How have you come to do what you do?
Yeah, awesome. Well, no, like I said, mate, it is great to be here. We've orbited around each other in this sort of Perth ecosystem of advertising and marketing for a number of years now, and I guess that's as good an entry point as any. The most relevant thing for your audience is that I have worked in the advertising and marketing space for the last 8 years now as a creative strategist and creative director. And that was initially over east in Sydney with an agency over there as their head of social. And then when I moved to Perth, I started consulting, joined up with Lush, the content agency, and then eventually sort of co-founded within the business a sister agency for Lush called Dear Storyteller. And I ran that and built that there for 6 years. And we worked with everyone from, Rio Tinto, Crown, RAC, Mineral Resources Limited, through to Mechanical Rock. That was our first job that we paired up with you guys on. And then most recently, we just finished doing a campaign with, well, we're not finished yet. It's still rolling out with Adapt.
Yes.
A local business that helps SMEs succeed. And so throughout that entire process, I guess my story and my role is really in solving problems with creativity. And that comes from a lot of empathy, a lot of deep listening, a lot of trying to understand how nearly all business problems are human problems and figuring out, decoding the language that sometimes gets used and finding the more human elements of whatever's going on and how to communicate that either to an audience, to an internal audience of employees, communicate a message that isn't getting across.
Very good. It's definitely something which can be challenging to explain to people, the importance of what being creative about getting the message right, and how that helps. When we think about marketing as a whole, we think about the tactics, or the channels. How are we actually getting a message to your potential customers? How are we taking them on the journey from just discovering that you exist to actually becoming a customer? But that process can be, as sophisticated and as perfect as you want, but without the lubrication of the actual messaging and the thing which is going to convince people to change their behaviour, that can be a very difficult thing to actually implement. And so what you do, I think, and what great creative strategists are able to do is, almost make that, an obvious path for people to take, as opposed to it being a mechanical, sort of almost transactional experience.
Yeah, I think anyone who's spent enough time with me knows that I love Seth Godin. And so, it would only be right to start off this podcast with a couple of Seth Godinisms. But there's two quotes that I think explain what you're talking about really well. The first is, people don't believe what you tell them. They sometimes believe what you show them. They often believe what their friends tell them. And they always believe what they tell themselves. Mm-hmm. So we are all going about our lives telling ourselves a story about the things that we're interacting with. And oftentimes that story comes pretty simply down to this idea of, do people like me do things like this? And so we're looking for patterns, we're looking for signals, we're looking for things that tell us, I'm in the right place. Mm-hmm. There's nothing kind of more that creates more cognitive dissonance than being somewhere where you're like, I do not belong. This is not for me. and that sense of the wanting to leave a space, leave a store, leave a shop front, etc. Because you're like, this doesn't help me express who I am. This doesn't help me double down on my identity. And I think the other one, the other Seth Godinism, is the best stories or the most effective stories don't tell us anything new. They simply remind us how right we were in the first place.
Right.
And so when you were talking about being that lubricant, about sort of helping people make that choice and feel like it was their choice all along, it is so much of my job is going, what is the story people tell themselves about this industry, about this product, etc. And rather than saying to somebody, you're wrong, this is what you should do instead, go, you're right, and that's why this is that.
So this is where people are always on the lookout for something to reinforce their existing world beliefs. That's why, like in politics, it's tribal in a way. People are always ignoring the things which counteract what they already believe and gravitating towards things which reinforce it.
We do. We get stuck into these echo chambers, and there is a really dark conversation we could have about all of that, which, let's avoid if we can.
But the thing about it is it's human nature.
Yes.
And understanding at a deep level, we're never going to change human nature, so how can we use it as marketers to our advantage? That's where storytelling comes in, right?
That's right. And I think inevitably as marketers and advertisers, this is our job. This is what we're valued for. This is what we're put into the world to do. And ultimately you want to do that in order to be influencing people to be doing things that they should be doing, that are actually going to add value to their life, that are actually going to help them. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, comes down to every creative's or every advertising person's individual choices about the clients that they work with and the types of things they will and won't work on, whether they align with their values or not. And then it's also down to like the due diligence of, one thing that I always say about my work is that I'm an investigator of remarkability, not a creator of it.
Got it. Okay. What do you mean by that?
So in a workshop, typically one of the first things we'll do with a client, and you did this recently with me with Adapt, is we sat down with them for 3 hours and we asked a lot of deep questions. And that was a really interesting one, right? Because Gabe and that team had done a lot of strategy work already and had been in workshops before. And oftentimes when you're dealing with a client who's done that, you get that resistance, that feeling.
Yeah, the strategic advisors in themselves.
Oh, here we go again. I've already said all this. And you can kind of get default answers.
Yep.
And so that ability to cut through, ask deeper questions and say, I understand that you feel like you've already answered this, but here's how my question is different to the one that you've answered before. And if you can get to another layer, then that can be really significant and really fruitful for giving you stuff to work with. But ultimately what I'm hunting for in those workshops is remarkable things about the business. Because if I don't find those and I just create something out of thin air, if you have a turd and you wrap it in glitter paper, when you unwrap the glitter paper, it's still a turd.
Yeah, well, you can freeze a turd and then varnish it and polish it up, and then it can be...
Then it becomes an artifact, and it's a whole different thing, right? You've alchemized it into something else. Yeah.
The fascinating thing, and the reason I love working with startups and tech companies, is because they do... basically all of them have created a solution to a problem, which is, once you really understand, is so obvious, but also so many people really need, if only you could get through to them that they need it, and without spending 3 hours in a room explaining it to them.
Yeah.
And so what our job is to find a way to distill that down into its most basic essence in terms of language, or in some sort of, format which is able to communicate that in as efficient way as possible.
Totally. And it is about synthesizing that message. It is about putting it in words that somebody else understands. It is about finding out what the story they tell themselves about what would be cool, what would give them status, what would be a nice affiliation for them to have. Steve Jobs did not sell the iPod by saying the compression rate of the songs allows us to take the data from this size to this size and allows for storage. He said 1,000 songs in your pocket.
Right. Yeah. And that wouldn't have been that sounds simple and elegant, but that wouldn't have actually necessarily been an easy thing to arrive at.
No.
It wouldn't have been obvious at the time.
Well, so often, right, the trap, and I think this is particularly prevalent in tech, is that the trap that people fall into is we are experts that are delivering products and services to people who, for the most part, are not experts, or they're not the same level of expert, or they've got a different specificity, right? And so in the past, I think there has been this shock and awe tactic that's been used a little bit, where it's like, if we just hit them with the jargon and show off how smart we are and make ourselves look smart, they'll go, well, I don't know what you're talking about, so you must be right.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that has really fallen off in terms of its effectiveness. And now, if you can make your client feel smart by just how well they understand what you do in simple human terms, and how easy it is for them to sell it to somebody else and explain it to somebody else, that's far more powerful. Because oftentimes, and I'm sure everyone has experienced this to some degree, right? You've got a connection at a business, but they're not the person that's going to buy from you. And so inevitably, on some level, somewhere along the track, you've talked to them and then they have to talk to someone else. And if your solution is too packed full of jargon and technical specificity for anyone to be able to explain to somebody else simply and easily what it is and why it's valuable, then you're going to fail, right?
I think in a way this has happened with in broad, new technologies that are coming out, even with Bitcoin and blockchain, right? That was a few years ago. And now I think we're seeing this with AI, where people are very excited about the technology and the possibilities, but the actual way that it's improving and changing people's lives is not as obvious. And what we're going to see is AI isn't really going to be the thing that we talk about. It's the solution that is deliberately, specific to my life and how it's going to change my life is going to be the thing which people talk about. I mean, we don't talk about TCP/IP anymore for the internet. It's, in fact, no one even thinks about it anymore. Yeah. It's just the internet just works. But I do get a whole lot of benefits out of that. Yeah, it's not about the technology. It's about the benefit to my life.
And I think it's really interesting, right? Because I think that will start to move as the value of AI starts to move into the solutions that it's creating over the fact that the market has been very excited about AI. So for a while, a lot of people with a lot of money and a lot of power decided that AI was phenomenal and the next big thing and very important and very valuable. And so marketing anything just meant whack AI on the end of it, and that will help sell it. And to a degree, that is a signal that somebody who's telling themselves the story, I'm an AI investor.
Yep.
And I've got to up the amount of AI in my portfolio. They saw that signal, part of the pattern, great, let's buy it. Whereas, for everyone else, they don't have that story that they're telling themselves. In fact, they might be telling themselves that AI is scary and terrible and taking all our jobs and, et cetera, Skynet, ... But the truth is, if you can wrap it into something else, if you can say, this is your story, this is how you go about your everyday life, and this is how this thing, where I didn't even mention the letters, has helped you deepen your identity, create more of what you're wanting to create in the world, become more of who you're wanting to become in the world. There you go. That's the story that I need to sell you to sell that product.
Like without getting too deep into the AI thing, I think that's been one of the real challenges, is not people getting what the technology does, but the challenge has been people actually coming up with an idea for how they can use it, if that makes sense. I mean, and you almost forget that actually there's this shortcut to life that's available to you, but I'm still going to keep on writing emails from scratch, or I'm still going to keep on looking up, Googling recipes for cooking dinner tonight, whereas it's just actually being able to have that idea. Actually, I can use AI for this now. That's a real kind of blocker for adoption of new technologies. And so it's our job as marketers and storytellers to help people make that connection, I suppose. I skipped over what we normally do on Weird Growth at the start, which is a pop quiz.
Okay.
And what we ask people is, if you were to start a brand new business from scratch today, theoretically, just a hypothetical, what would you be doing and who would you be helping?
That's so funny, because I can't, in all good faith, I mean, you've put me on the spot, and maybe
that's the point. That's why it's called a pop quiz.
And maybe if I was playing by the rules, I would invent something here right now. But I did start a business less than 6 months ago.
You did, and this is where the chief mystery officer comes from, right?
That's right, yeah. So weird, right? I've been working in advertising and marketing for the last 8 years. In November, I left Your Storyteller and Lush, the content agency, went out on my own and have been freelancing since. And that's given me a little bit more time and a little bit more agency. And in that time and with that agency, I have developed this business called Folklore, which is a murder mystery event business.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I love it, and because I think that in-person shared experiences that help people bond over a shared experience are possibly one of the most important and valuable things in the world right now. We keep on talking about the ways in which technology can connect us and help bring us closer together. But in my life and through my experience, the idea of games, sharing experiences, coming together and being able to play, step outside of yourself for a little while and do something that is physically and viscerally charging, exciting, and then step out of it and kind of go, what was that fever dream? And start excitedly recounting it to one another with the people that you were there with. There's a special kind of magic in that just makes my brain go brrr. And so, yeah, 6 months ago now, I started that. I developed my own social bluffing game system called Monster Hunt. That is our flagship game that we run. I'm working on 2 others. One's sort of based on a mafia style theme. The other one's based on a survivor style theme.
Oh, wow.
We've run a whole heap of events. We've got 17 5-star Google reviews. And yeah, I think for the most part, I am wanting to help anyone from like 25 to 50 that has a group of friends that wants to do something meaningful, that doesn't want to just go to the pub and drink, but wants to get people together, that doesn't want to do some of the stuff that they've done again and again and again, which it might be like mini part or axe throwing or escape rooms, etc. And have something that is highly interactive, highly engaging, and involves a lot of communication. And, you know, our little tagline is out-scheme, outwit, out-bluff. So there's a bit of dastardly lying and Machiavellianism that goes on in it as well, which is a lot of fun.
I've been watching you build this over the past 6 months, and it really does look fun for starters. I can't wait to give it a try and take our team. And yeah, it does look like a really beautiful sort of Venn diagram crossover of the corporate kind of event with a completely different angle that, you know, no one's ever done before, but also a format which people will relate to even if they've not done it before or haven't done it for ages. I mean, Murder Mystery Nights was probably a thing in the 80s with how to host a murder and things. I remember my parents doing things like that. But yeah, wonderful work on identifying that. What went into identifying that was the solution to this sort of in-person connection? How did you come across that?
I think it comes from that idea of a bit of nostalgia, the pre-existing idea, and the way in which that would fit into a story that people tell themselves. Mm-hmm. The idea and the concept of murder mysteries is always fun, has always been fun, and sometimes the execution has been really lame.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would probably be the first thing that people would come into their heads is, oh, geez, okay, how's this going to work? It's going to feel a bit forced.
And, you know, another weird segue, but my background is in acting. I studied acting at the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts, and that means as a poor starving artist way back in the day in my early 20s, I actually ran a couple of murder mystery events back in the day, old school ones. And to be honest, they were terrible. I really didn't like them. They had these weird clues and some weird, terrible scripts that I had to follow and act out. And I was like, this isn't, I don't know. And so for a period of about 6 to 8 years, I was playing these social bluffing games, which is all based around the idea that there's an informed minority of evil players who know who each other are, and then a much larger, uninformed majority of good players who have no idea what the fuck is going on.
So there's like Secret Hitler and a few of those which became a bit popular.
Yeah, exactly. Werewolf Mafia, all those sorts of things. And I loved them, and I could see the level of engagement that they would create, in the sense that of like, we're all fighting these devices in our pockets all the time, right? And the way that they steal our attention.
Yep.
And when I played these games, I had never seen the same level of like an hour and a half of game starts, lean in.
Focus.
That, the video game meme with the controller and the lean in.
Yeah.
People would do that, but without the controller in their hands. And you'd see absolute utter focus and flow state off of this thing that seems so simple. And so I developed this system and have been playing it and loving it. And the way that I describe it is it's kind of like a horror film, in the sense that what is great about a horror film is you are scared of what is happening on the screen, even though somewhere psychologically in the back of your mind, you're safe.
Yeah.
And in this game,
it's like a roller coaster.
You get to lie through your teeth. You get to swear on whatever you want to swear on. And at the end of it, you're okay and it's safe and it's actually celebrated and laughed at and told stories about, because we're in the safety of a game.
It's the ultimate escapism, except you get to do it with others. That's fantastic. Yeah, well done, mate. What's the business model idea behind this? This is really interesting because you, in a way, are the product as well if you're the host, right? So, and it looks like people have had a wonderful time, but how do you scale something like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, and this is possibly where I'm a little bit antithetical. I don't care too much about scaling.
Okay, there's nothing wrong with that.
From the perspective of, a little while ago, I think I decided that the thing that I actually care about most in the world is how special can I make moments for the people that I care about.
Wow.
And I don't need huge amounts of money to do that. I don't need, to be to have an important title or to be a part of a huge company to do that. Oftentimes it just takes time, thoughtfulness, empathy, and a sense of the moment. And so with a business like this, I can train other people to run the system. I can make sure that it's all systemized and down to the T. But I tell you what, like genuinely, and this is just it's just a silly thing to put out in the world, but my dream with it is to run some ads in New York, London, Barcelona, etc., and just do traveling murder mysteries.
Oh, mate.
Like that would be sick. You book 5 in a city over the course of a month or whatever, and it pays for your trip.
Mate, magic. So, build a nice lifestyle around it. That'd be fantastic. Yeah, beautiful. Well done. Highly recommend anyone listening go and check out Folklore. And if you've got a team at work or group of friends or whatever, it sounds like the perfect thing to do as an end of year wrap up or team building type of thing. Where is it up to now? You have are you booked out for the rest of the year, or where are you up to?
No, we've still got spaces. We've got a few really cool corporate events coming up. We just ran our first ticketed event at Lawson Flats, which was interesting. Such a good venue. Yeah, amazing venue. But typically the game takes 8 to 15 players in order to play. But we wanted to do one where you could just come along as a 1 or 2 or 3 people, and you just all buy tickets to the event. But for the most part, we do either social events or corporate events, 8 to 15 players. We've got spaces in the rest of the lead up. You can find it on the website at playfolklore.com.
Brilliant, mate. Wonderful. I want to get back a little bit to, there's probably founders out there who are wondering, okay, point taken, I need to figure out a way to tell people my story, or tell a story to them a little bit more about what I'm solving for them, and you've got this sort of product marketing viewpoint where let's talk about features, let's talk about the problems that I'm solving, let's just be very black and white about how we what we're doing, versus this sort of nebulous magic fairy dust creative angle of things. How do we, as an industry, how do we better explain to particularly technical people, founders of startups, how do we explain the importance of that to them, and how do we help them figure out how they can actually make that happen in their business? Yeah,
so an interesting way that I break this down is we tend to focus on the audience. Exactly what you asked me before, who are you seeking to serve, right? And the way that I often break down audience is identity, worldview, and cultural conversations.
Okay.
So in other words, identity, how I see myself, worldview, how I see the world, and cultural conversations, the topics that interest me.
Okay, right.
And so that identity is the performance that we're putting out to the world every day. through the clothes that we wear, the way that we sound, the words that we choose to express ourselves, etc. It's often like in our social media bios, I'm a plant dad, I'm a marathon runner, all these things that we...
Craft beer aficionado.
Correct, right? Exactly. Our worldview often goes deeper into values and beliefs, and the idea that a good thing that I will often come to is the idea that starting a worldview can look like starting the sentence, life is about ...
Okay. Yep.
And so a worldview is life is about taking care of number one.
Yep.
Or life is about the collective, the whole, and everyone getting home together.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes a worldview has a diametrically opposed opposite. That's how you know that you've struck on one.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
As in, life is either about taking care of number one or it's about the whole, the collective,
black and white.
etc. Yeah.
Okay.
And people are complicated, but this is a sort of way of going, which worldview are we speaking to when we're speaking about this product to this market?
Yep.
And so the example that I have that I can talk to is this campaign that we did a couple of years ago for Republic of Fremantle, which is a gin distillery down in Freo. And these guys came to us because they were doing an equity crowdfunding raise through a company called Birchal.
Birchal,
on the East Coast. And we got brought on as a creative agency through partner Glide, and we worked with them to craft their story. And one thing that I did throughout that process was really tapped into the idea of Fremantle as a place, as a feeling, as a people, and as an identity. And going, how do we make the Republic of Fremantle indivisible from Freo in the midst of this campaign that calls on locals to feel pride, feel sense of place, and want to support this place that is an expression of them and that identity.
Nice.
And so instead of talking about their award-winning gin and vodka, which we absolutely did, if you'll imbibe me, I've got like a little snippet of the script here.
100%. Let's hear it.
And I do a lot of VOs, so get ready. Here's the voiceover voice.
Prepare your earballs, ladies and gentlemen.
Fremantle's culture has always been a champion of individuality, contrarian thinkers and cultural renegades. The real Freo, the backstreet cafes, the holes in the wall, the cultural melting pots, they're breeding grounds for people who are obsessed with their craft. The Republic of Fremantle is a celebration of that craftsmanship. What kicked off as a trio of rusted-on Freo people throwing their hat in the ring has evolved into an entire philosophy of making spirits from scratch.
Wowee.
And so you go, here's the story that you tell yourself about Fremantle, why you love it, what the real Freo is. You're a rusted-on Freo people. These are rusted-on Freo people. And here's why what they created matches exactly who you think you are.
So that's one circle of that three sections. So you've got your identity, your worldview, and then cultural conversations.
Yeah, the topics that engage you. And so... The topic, the way that I always explain cultural conversations, and this is a favourite of yours, so I know you won't mind hearing it again.
Yeah, it's a good story.
Is that, we have conversations with our friends every weekend, right? We're standing around, we're talking about the trips that we want to go on for the rest of the year. We're talking about Daniel Ricciardo getting the sack from Red Bull. We're talking about I don't know, the latest movie that came out on Netflix. We're talking about the how Adam Brody is back as a rom-com lead and like girls are going crazy for it. And then somebody inevitably comes along, a marketer comes along and goes, I want to talk about vacuum cleaners.
Yeah. And that goes down real well.
And everyone goes, what? Bro, read the room. Like what's going on? I don't care about vacuum cleaners. What are you talking about? And so as brands, how do we genuinely add value to cultural conversations that are going on as opposed to inserting ourselves and our products and our features and benefits in places where they're not needed? Now that's hard because as a brand, you also need salience, right? You need mental availability. You have to be there at times where people do not want you to be there because you have to be the brand that comes front of mind when they're ready to make the purchasing decision. And so it's been a reckoning for me, even as an advertising creative, to go, I actually have to be able to create ads for when people don't want us around.
But as a performance marketer, what we do at Ammo, digital marketing, running ads which is designed to interrupt people's, information flow as they're scrolling through Instagram. it makes our job so much easier, and at a finance level, we get far cheaper cost per click, cost per conversion when it is content which does inject itself into the cultural conversation, or at least find a way to lubricate that as much as possible.
Less friction. I think one of the biggest things that I touted when I sort of came back to Perth and started in this industry in earnest was stop making ads that look like ads.
Mm-hmm.
The conventions that you're using for the advertisements that you're making are advertising conventions that you've seen on other ads that you've watched, you're doing it wrong. Try to find, and this is another big thing when I'm looking at audience, right? And it's part of that cultural conversations is what entertainment do they watch? When they're bored, what's the informative entertainment or the just plain, mind-numbing, doom-scrolling entertainment that they reach for? And what are the conventions in that? And then just like you kind of give the pill to the dog wrapped in a bit of meat to kind of hide it, go, how do you wrap your branding message in a bit of meat for the viewer to go, and using those conventions of entertainment?
It sounds so simple and obvious, but it's not easy, right?
Well, it's hard because inevitably, when you are doing an impersonation of other advertisements, it's easy to go, we met spec. We created an ad that looked like other ads.
Yeah,
we
did our job. Yeah.
When you are creating entertainment, conventional advertising, you are competing against every other form of entertainment. Now, the truth is, the other person is as well, and they're just failing. Mm-hmm. But you are competing against Netflix. You are competing against Mr. Beast. You are competing against Tim Ferriss and Diary of a CEO, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all those people are throwing balls to the wall, everything they've got to make sure that their content is as consumable and attention-grabbing as possible. And so as advertisers, it sounds simple, but it's actually really hard because you're going, truth is we've got to be an incredible storyteller. Truth is we've got to know what captures people's attention. And to be honest, it can be that complex, that rich, that whatever. It can also be, and this is another one of my favorite examples, but there was a tweet that Oscar Piastri put out like 3 years ago. Oscar is an F1 driver.
Yep, McLaren.
And it was when we all thought, sorry to be throwing Daniel under the bus during this podcast, when he lost his last job.
Poor Daniel Rick.
Exactly. For McLaren, Oscar put out a tweet saying, Alpine F1 has said that I will be driving for them this next year. That is not true. I have not signed a contract. I am still a free agent and my driving status is very much up for competition. Mm-hmm. And this garnered a huge amount of attention and eyeballs because everyone was just like, what does this mean? Like, does this mean that Ricciardo's going to lose his job? Is he going to McLaren, et cetera, et cetera?
But this was a guy who wasn't even in F1 yet, right?
Totally. And he was a rising star and very much like the center of attention in that world because everyone knew he was going to be a gun. And then in the responses to those tweets, Specsavers says, all right, which one of you needs to see us in the morning? And makes a great joke that adds value to that doesn't center themselves. They didn't say, at Specsavers, you can get 2 frames for the price of 1 and blah, 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 right? They didn't say, our frames are lightweight and only cost $69. They didn't say that. They added genuine value to the conversation. And that was as cheap as hiring a good social media manager that wrote a tweet.
Incredible.
And it got something like 150,000 retweets and like over 1 million views.
Amazing. Speaking of viral reach, can we talk a little bit about TikTok?
Yes.
Because being probably not the new kid on the block anymore, but probably the channel which has the most chance of viral sort of reach at where we are now. It's a tempting channel for people to try, but if it's probably the least forgiving channel if you go in there and make it feel like an ad, right? Yeah. And I know you were or are TikTok famous at one point. What do people need to sort of think about?
Yeah, I mean, a while ago last year for 6 months, I built a TikTok channel that amassed 4.2 million views, about 33,000 followers.
Wow.
And was growing exponentially until I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore and shut it off. But it was an incredibly interesting experience and thought experiment from the perspective of the way that I went about it, right? When I first started on TikTok, I was creating content every single day, and I was throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what stuck. And I was doing a wide array of different types of content. And then eventually, over the course of that first 3 weeks, 4 weeks period, a few things started to hit. And so every time something hit a little bit, I would go, well, let me try to create something again like that. TikTok is a very personality-driven space. It's a very, very idiosyncratic place in terms of the types of conventions that are being used.
Yep.
You have to watch stuff and see those conventions at work, at play, and understand them in order to do your version of them.
Yep. So it's you have to be part of, well, you have to be scrolling TikTok yourself a lot to be sort of getting a feel for what works and what doesn't. And then the velocity of content that you're pumping out is that other feedback loop that you need to be learning from over time.
Exactly. And then on top of that, as I went along, the cadence went down, right? Like I would create maybe 1-2 videos a week that would perform better than anything that I had posted in the early days. But it was because I'd built this kind of idea of 4 different content pillars that I was like, every time I do one of these, it hits.
Yep.
And in the early part, it was very much driven by trends. It's like, what can I do that's popular so that I can kind of ride that coattail and get some views based on that, people that are scrolling those trends or looking through those sounds or et cetera, et cetera. And then more and more as we went along, and this is something that I think we're seeing across the social media space, it was a different kind of remixing that was going on. It was not, what's your version of this sound? Like, what's your version of this dance? Not that I was doing dances.
I was going to say, what sort of content were you posting?
Well, I was creating a lot of TTRPG content, tabletop role-playing games. So, you know, similar to social bluffing games. And
Dungeons and
like
Dragons type stuff.
Dungeons and Dragons type stuff. And
sorry, what's the acronym for
TTRPG.
Right, okay.
Tabletop role-playing
We'll just learn something new. There we go.
And yeah, it was really fascinating space to be in. I think a lot of my scripted sketches ended up doing really well on that because, again, my focus was just on how can I reflect the audience back to themselves? Like, how can I reflect their experiences, the types of people that they run into, the types of experiences they've had around a gaming table back to them in a funny way? And how can I add value to that conversation? And so I was creating more and more and more original content that was specific to that niche and reflecting people's identity and worldview back to them through a cultural conversation that they were interested in.
Yep.
And that was the stuff that kept on hitting again and again.
So again, holding that mirror up, what do people like me do? What do people like, what do we talk about in our cultural circle?
And one of the big things, and this wasn't something that I focused on at the time, but I've heard somebody say it, where the first thing that they think about when they're creating a new piece of content is who and why will someone send this to someone else, and who will they send it to?
Yep.
Because particularly on Instagram and TikTok, that your shares, more than likes, more than comments, is like, how are you getting into the group chat?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Because ultimately you are creating an opportunity for someone to connect when you create content.
Yep. So thinking that through, you know, how does this play out where I want my content to be screenshotted or the link to be pasted into the team WhatsApp group or whatever it is, because it makes me feel smart or makes me feel like the person who's driving the cultural conversation inside my peer group or whatever it is.
Or, I mean, not even like screenshot or linked, but like just genuinely sending the post inside the app. Like, you know, with Instagram Reels and with TikTok, you can just, there's a little arrow and you just press it and then it gives you your most sent to people. And then oftentimes it's just loads of people are just hitting that share button and going. There's a thing that penguins do it's been described as, which is called pebbling. And it's just like this idea of bringing little pebbles back to your loved ones as gifts to show your affection. Yeah, except people do that with memes. And, you always hear people talk about the idea that memes are my love language. Mm-hmm. It's a better love language than gentle bullying, which is also another modern love language.
Beer is my love language for anyone listening out there.
That's how we pebble you. We give you beer.
Pebble.
So it is this way of showing affection, this opportunity to connect, this opportunity to say, hey, look, it's people like us.
What other campaigns have you either worked on or have you seen that you've really loved, that you've seen from a tech startup point of view? Can you think of any that you think have been really clever or effective, or something that other founders out there might be able to learn from?
From a tech startup point of view, I think it's not necessarily a campaign. It's not necessarily advertising, but you put me on the spot and this is what's come to mind. There's a YouTube channel called Cleo Abrams.
Okay.
And she has created a show on that YouTube channel called Huge If True. Mm-hmm. And it is very much based around tech and science.
Okay.
And it is, I can't remember if they're like 5 or 20 minute sort of episodes, but it's very much like fast-paced, attention-filled documentary filmmaking.
Awesome.
Is the style that she's done. And she's one of the fastest growing channels on YouTube by far. And she has done episodes, and to be honest, that is a branding exercise. She's done episodes with Formula One. She's done episodes with the Hadron Collider.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Probably
big old underground circle. Yeah.
Yep, correct.
Amazing.
And a whole bunch of others. And she's taken these very high-minded scientific techniques, and her whole mission with the channel is to generate optimism for the future. Yep. She just felt like, as a journalist in her past life, that there was a lot of doom and gloom out in the world, and a lot of pessimism from young people about not wanting to have kids because not necessarily feeling confident that the world was going to be in a good place for them when they grew up.
Jeez.
And so she wanted to create this space and this channel for optimism, and the idea of that'd be huge if true. Like, if you're really making that. And I think one of the reason why I thought about it when you asked that question was because she also just did a podcast with Mark Zuckerberg.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And he was talking about all of the stuff that Meta is doing in terms of the glasses, in terms of the Quest, and their mission, and Llama as an AI thing. And it kind of went through all of that stuff with Mark. And I know it is a weird one, and it's not necessarily what we would traditionally think of as advertising, but I think that Mark has very successfully reshaped his PR image over the last year.
100%. Yeah. Wakeboarding with the American flag. He's got the long hair going on, the gold chain.
The fake beard meme, I don't know what that was about. When he had the beard, when they superimposed a beard on his face, and everyone was just like, is Mark hot? Weird questions.
But you listen to him in interviews over the past 12 months as well, and he's become so much more relatable.
Yeah.
He's not the weird droid boy that he was when he was in that Senate sort of hearing where it was pasty and sweaty and, defensive.
Yeah.
And now there's no fucks to be given. He's just like, well, I'm on a mission to actually make the world better, not just to consolidate the billions that I've made from Facebook. It's actually pretty cool.
And undoubtedly, right, he changed his outward-facing external expression of his identity to fit more of an everyman type thing. In his earlier years, that idea of the hoodie-wearing CEO, that idea of being the tech boy, that was very important to fitting in with a crowd that were elevating him. And then now he needs to be more of an everyman. And so those loose-fitting graphic printed tees and the long chain necklaces and the doing jiu-jitsu and all that sort of stuff. Make no mistake, there is a team of people working behind the scenes to make sure that he is on point and doing things the right way.
I'm sure he has the best advice money can buy. Sure.
It's cool to have. It's easy to have cool hobbies when you're a when you're a billionaire and can take time off whenever you want.
But the point you made before is we do have every right to be optimistic for the future, is my view. And in fact, I think in the reasonably near future, the next 2 to 3 years, we are going to see an explosion in the quality of life that people experience. I think it's hard for people to imagine it, but I think we're on the cusp of, I don't know why it is just now, but our job at the moment is just to stay alive for the next 2 or 3 years. Don't go bungee jumping or jumping out of airplanes because any risk-taking behaviour could reduce the likelihood that you're going to get to see this absolute halcyon days, which I think are coming. We're going to have household robots in the next 5 years, is my view. We're not going to have to worry about doing the washing or folding or putting away clothes. That's what I'm bloody excited about.
That's huge,
to be honest.
To me, yeah.
We're going to have driverless taxis and cars. We're going to have a cleaner environment. We're going to have an abundance of resources. Energy is going to become extremely cheap. And in the next 3 to 5 years, in my view, we've got every right to be very excited for the future. As much crap stuff is going on in the world as well. I'm very excited and optimistic.
I love that oracle moment from you, mate. If that comes to fruition, I'm all for Cam's version of the future. Let's do it.
What could possibly be in the future for you, do you think?
Look, I mean, my life has always, I think, found a lot of interest, fulfillment, and passion from just collaborating with talented people. For the most part, I think my mission in the last 6 years has been to collaborate with talented creatives, to be able to work with really interesting people doing interesting stuff. But also from a client side perspective, if there's people really putting value into the world, that it's like, hey, we've created this awesome thing, but we're having struggle telling that story and putting it out into the world. I love doing that. I love being in those moments with people.
It's definitely your field of genius, yeah.
Thank you, mate.
Seen you in action multiple times. It's a pleasure to work with.
I really appreciate it. And then, I think also just making special moments for the people that I care about. And that might be, somebody that has chosen to put their faith in me and hire Folklore as a service. It might be friends and family. But I just think that as human beings, something that has happened in recent history compared to all of human history is we've lost a lot of rituals and traditions. Mm-hmm. And here's a weird tip for anyone out there. As you're going through life, we're getting to the end of the year. There's a lot of opportunities to mark the moment as you get to the end of the year. It could be an end of financial year party, could be Christmas, could be New Year's. Don't just skirt through it. Don't just let it go through to the keeper. Whether it's giving a speech, whether it's taking someone's hand and saying, just stop for a second, take a look around. Marking those moments and actually documenting our lives here on this earth, our passage of time, and realizing the specialness of that. That's my number one tip.
I love that, because that was going to be the next question I asked, is what is your number one piece of advice for founders who are looking to grow? And I think that's a beautiful tip for life. Practicing gratitude, taking that step back just to be thankful for, what we have. I do that with my family, with my girls every night. We sit down around the dinner table and everyone has to share what their glimmer of the day was. Mm-hmm. And it's a ritual. It's a way that you can build that into, the regular pace of life. But it's definitely just good for your mental health. It's so easy to get caught up in and focused on all the crap challenges and stuff that you're dealing with, but at the detriment of just sitting back and soaking in the good stuff, right?
Yeah, 100%. And also, like, we can do that at our work lives as well. We can let things go through to the keeper. We can take it in our stride as like, yeah, move on. Celebrate your wins. Yeah. And also elevate what you're doing to sometimes, right, when it's healthy to, elevate what you're doing to the level of mythos. Like, find the legend in what you're doing. And whether that's celebrating the employees that do that, whether that's taking the moment to document that in a way that's not perfunctory, that's not just a group photo, but has some artistry to it, and elevate it. Elevate it. That's what storytelling does. That's what poetry does. That's what the idea of design and artistry does. It elevates those moments so that we can look back at them, or so that an audience outside who doesn't care about your thing as much as you do can look at it and go, actually, that's pretty cool.
Beautiful words, Mike. Getting to the end of the show, and something we like to do to wrap up Weird Growth is a show and tell. a favourite tool, device, toy, something in your life which makes your life better every day. What's something that you have there?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. The first thing that came to mind was the piece of software that has made me the most money in my life is the Notes app on iPhone.
How so?
I'm a huge believer in ship above all else. And I think that perfectionism is a safe place to hide. And I think that people who do things and create things and put things into the world have so many bad ideas. And it is because they're able to get through those bad ideas that they get to good ideas.
Yep.
And so pretty much any time that anybody asks me to start anything, I just open my Notes app and I start.
Wow.
And I just get
that first thing out.
Stuff out on paper.
Nice.
And as well, like a major hack for me is like if I have a bad idea and I go, oh, that sucked, I then usually grapple with that for about 30 seconds and then I go write it down, type it out, put it on the Notes app, because if you don't, this thing will hang around in your head for the next hour teasing you for how you came up with that bad idea. Whereas once it's out and it's on paper, it's released into the world. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, I use... It's pretty basic. I know that there are other ones out there. It's a combination of being first to market, having a good story in the early days. Now, even though there are alternatives that might be more ethical, more effective, etc., and I'm slowly starting to explore them, but also because of the sunk cost of already paying for a subscription for it, I use ChatGPT a lot.
Yep,
really helps me in my everyday life. The idea of it's so much simpler than Googling.
What use cases would you be most common use ChatGPT for?
So much stuff, but research is a big one. Despite the fact that you then have to double check and fact check everything that you get from it. One of the most fascinating, and this is really nerdy, but one of the most fascinating use cases I had for a while back was I got into Civilization 6 again, playing the Civilization games I used to play way back in the day. And it was almost the best use case for AI that I've seen. Was because I'd forgotten how to play this thing completely. And so I just started asking like, hey, wait, how do I optimize culture if I've got 3 cities, I'm playing as this nation, et cetera, And I think because those things have Reddits and wikis and so much text.
So much, yeah.
It was perfect, on point. I asked this thing, I was sick at the time, I asked this thing questions for about 3 hours straight as I was playing, and I was like, it's all correct. It all helped. So
the reason I was laughing is because I do exactly the same thing with Stardew Valley with my 5-year-old daughter. Stardew Valley is like sometimes complicated and not unintuitive. There's so many weird quirks and things that you need to know to get your farm to grow, and it's been ideal for that. So yeah, poor old ChatGPT. At least they never get annoyed at asking dumb questions about Stardew Valley. Mate, love that. And there's so many little nuggets throughout everything that we've talked about already in nearly an hour. I'd love to, I'm sure we can keep going on for more hours, but I've really enjoyed this chat. It's the first but not the last, I'm sure. But please, what's the final plug? If anyone's out there listening, is interested in learning more about you or getting involved in Folklore, what should they do?
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Mike Drysdale on LinkedIn, Drysdale. I'm also Mike.Drysdale on Instagram, if that's your preferred platform.
No longer on TikTok, I believe.
Yeah. And then if you want to do something with Folklore, I'd love to talk about it. You can either email us info@playfolklore.com or just visit www.playfolklore.com.
Mike, thank you so much for being on Weird Growth. Fantastic conversation. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for listening in to this latest episode of Weird Growth. If you enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. And if you're just listening to the audio version of this, there are 2 beautiful camera angles. Mike's Mike's delicately draped in the table in the leather chair here. You need to see it to believe it. So please do jump on YouTube, or you can watch on Spotify as well. It's actually, believe it or not, more people watch us on the video on Spotify than listen to us now. So Spotify's incredibly taken over the podcast
Yeah.
world in a very short period of time. So thank you very much. I'm Cam Sinclair. This has been Weird Growth. Bye-bye.